Flosstube. My name is Becca, and I am SamBrie Stitches here on YouTube and other social media platforms. This is a Flosstube special edition of Interview with a Flosstuber, and it's actually the first of the year for 2024. I took a couple months off to market prep, but I'm very, very excited to be here with Andrew, who is the runner stitcher. I always want to say the running stitcher.
I know
But it's the runner stitcher on social media. I am excited. I reached out to Andrew because maybe 2-3 months ago, because this channel's still fairly new, came up on my suggested page. I thought, oh, cool, I like to see new floss tubers. Clicked on it, and not only because of his name, the runner stitcher, obviously he talks about running, which we'll probably get into in a little bit, but he also stitches very unique pieces. They're cool, and I think they're different than at least what I've seen here on Flosstube. It's just really neat, and he has different ideas and different techniques and different finishes and that kind of stuff. So you really want to go check out his channel and his Instagram, and all the links are going to be down below. But he's got a pretty cool channel. So you want to go check it out for sure. So I really appreciate you being here.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really am so happy to be here and chatting with you, and this is awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. So before we jump into the questions, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Andrew, as she said. I live in New York City. I've been here it'll be 14 years in June. I can hardly believe it's been that long. But I actually grew up in Pennsylvania. I was just outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, so only about a 2.5-hour drive into the city. And throughout high school, friends and I would take day trips into the city, and we'd come and explore a little bit and see a Broadway show, and I kind of fell in love with the city. So I, after college, moved here, and yeah, been happy ever since. I live here with my boyfriend. We've been together just over 5 years, which is awesome. And yeah, we're just really enjoying it. So that's a little bit about me.
I have visited New York a couple of times. We used to live on the East Coast. My husband was stationed in Connecticut. So
Okay.
Connecticut, 45 minutes any direction, you could be elsewhere, basically.
Totally.
Yeah, so we went and visited New York just after 9/11, actually, one of the times. So it's an amazing city. It's a very busy city, something different than what I'm used to. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of marathons and stuff that you do in New York too, which is pretty cool.
For
So
sure. Yeah, it's great for that. There's plenty of races to always be taking part in. It is a very busy city, I think, especially since COVID. COVID was a very scary, or 2020, I guess, was a very scary time with everything happening here and being around so many people. But since then, it's nice to have all the options of, like, if I want to have Thai food delivered to my apartment, I can. If I want to have Indian food, I can have it delivered. There's
cool.
such a variety of things to eat and to do here in the city that I love. I'm also lucky because I do get to work from home, and so I don't really have to be out in the hustle and bustle of morning commutes and traffic and things, which is pretty nice. So there's a balance there for sure.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know you work from home. That makes things, even better, because then
It
you
does,
won't have to
yeah,
go out and deal with all the craziness. But
yeah, for sure.
so let's jump into the questions and kind of learn
Yeah.
a little bit more about you. The first one is, why did you start a floss tube, and were there any particular motivations?
Yeah. Um, I guess sort of like everybody else, I stumbled upon Flosstube just looking for tutorials when I picked up cross stitch again, and just thought it was so fascinating to watch everybody's progress and channels. And so when I started my own, I really thought this would be a great way for me to have kind of a video diary of my progress. I think when I found Flosstube, I liked sticking with one channel and kind of like starting far back and then watching the progress each video on the same project. For some reason, I just really enjoyed that. And I was like, that would be awesome for me to have like a visual representation of where I was along the way in my progress on my projects. So I thought I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. And, I'll have this video diary for myself. So that's really what spurred me on. I had no idea what it would lead to, or that I would meet so many amazing, kind people. um,
The
I was
community
really
is
just blown
incredible.
away by that. It's something I have never experienced before.
Yeah, I try to tell people that because I bring my stitching with me everywhere. Uh,
Yeah,
and it strikes up conversations in like the weirdest places.
yeah,
And I try to explain the biggest thing for me is the community. People just don't realize that they think that cross stitching is kind of a solitary type of, hobby. Um, but in a way it is, but in a way, once you get into the community and you just have instant connections with people, or, there's something about just being part of it.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I always thought I was like the only person stitching. I had no idea that there were other people doing it as well. So it
yep.
was really
There's
cool
a
to,
lot of other people doing it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I really had no expectations when I started it. I just wanted to have kind of a representation of my progress of my projects.
Yeah.
So
And your channel's grown quite a bit because what has it been, about 3 months, right?
yeah, I think my
Yeah.
first one went up right around Thanksgiving in November. So it's been, yeah, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so this is probably an obvious answer, but how did you come up with your channel name?
Yeah, it speaks for itself, I would say. But obviously I'm a cross stitcher and I also am a runner. So I do a bunch of running races. I've done a few marathons, a bunch of half marathons and smaller races as well. And so I wanted kind of a way to incorporate both of my hobbies. And so after some thought, the runner stitcher came up and just sort of had a little ring to it in my head at least. And this could work. I think this sounds like a good name, and then people kind of know what they're getting into just from the name of the channel, and so kind of stuck, and there it was.
I think it's really neat that you share your running. Usually you kind of do it towards the beginning of the video. You kind of share a
Mm.
little bit. You don't like dwell on it, I think, but it's really cool. And what I enjoyed was your whole experience with that, how the
Yeah.
bubbles were so cool looking. Like, it's really neat that you share that aspect, because a lot of us, I don't.
And that's totally fine. It's
um
been,
yeah, but it's just like living through you, and seeing and hearing that experience is pretty cool. So
yeah, I really didn't know how many other runners I would find and who were also stitchers, and there's actually quite a few that have reached out since I've been chatting and saying, I'm signed up for this half marathon or I have this race coming up. And so it's really cool to see again, I guess, that I'm not alone in my enjoyment of running and stitching. And yeah, I thought it'd be something fun to share that maybe would be a little different and not everybody would get exposure to. And so things like the Disney races with the medals, they just were too cool not to share. And so
yeah, I thought they were
maybe people
cool,
will
and I'm
be
not even a
interested in it.
runner.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's been good.
I know New York is big, but I know Ymir from Almond M&Ms is a runner, and she's
Yeah,
in New York. So
totally. We
yeah.
actually were able to meet up at a race. This was probably early December, so very early on in my Flosstube journey. And we were running the same race. And so beforehand we were able to, or no, she was cheering on that day. So she had friends running that race. And she told me she would be there, and I'm running along, and all of a sudden there she is cheering my name, "Go Andrew!" I was like, "Oh my goodness, it's nice to see you in person." And then we
So
actually got to meet after the race too, which was really cool. So
I love that. Yeah, Ymir's pretty cool. She came to market, so I got to
yeah,
meet her at market. So that's how I know.
awesome.
Yeah, very cool. So how did you learn to stitch, and how long have you been stitching?
Yeah, I learned to stitch a while ago. I probably was in like middle school, I think, and I learned from both my mom and my aunt. So I sort of shared a little bit about this in my early floss tubes, but they used to stitch on sweatshirts, kind of like I did at the beginning, and they stitched a couple for myself and my brother, but they would also stitch them for craft shows. And I always was fascinated by it and thought it was so interesting with the different colors and what they were doing. And so they're the ones that taught me how to. They got me my first cross stitch kit for Christmas one year. And I don't know what the count was. It probably was like an 11 count or a 10 count Ada, something easier to sort of learn on. And It was a teddy bear. I think he was like holding a crayon. I remember that. Um, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did a few other patterns and designs. Unfortunately, I don't have any of them anymore. I'm not sure like in the move where they went, but yes, I did it for a little while in those years, and then I just kind of stopped. And you know, high school happened, college happened, and then getting a job, and I just didn't pick it back up. And so then in the past year, like last April, I guess it was almost a year, I had kind of started getting back into more crafty hobbies. So I did like a diamond painting and did like a latch hook kit. And I was like, this is kind of fun. I'm enjoying it. Like I like to be sort of crafty. And then along that line, like came an ad for a cross stitch kit on Instagram. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to cross stitch. Like, why didn't I think of that before? Maybe I should pick this back up. So picked it back up, and then I haven't stopped stitching since then. So, and I'm definitely glad to have rediscovered it, but it's really only been the past year that I've really been diving into cross stitch again. So
Have you noticed a lot has changed from when you used to stitch to like when you started about a year ago?
so much. Oh my goodness. I was telling my mom, I was like, you would not believe the amount of tools that there are to stitch now that like just help you so much in what you're doing. And when I was in Florida visiting her, I was able to like show her some of the things. And I was like, look, here's my needle minder that keeps my needle right on the fabric when I need it.
Yep.
Yeah, all of those. And she was like, oh, that's so cool. She's like, I used to lose so many needles in the process. Um, and then I showed her like a little needle threader that I use, and she was like, oh, that would be great too, because it's so hard to get the thread through. And they used to like lick the thread to get it
It
through the
takes forever trying to get I yeah, I get it.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so many, it's just a different world. And I think even the amount of like different fabrics that are available, the fabric dyers, the colors you can find, it's a whole new world. I think that's what makes it so much fun, is that you can take a piece, and even if 20 people stitch the same project, you really can personalize it on either the fabric, or you can switch out some colors, and it's really like your own piece of art when you're done with it. I don't know if all that was available 10 years ago or not, but not in my world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like years ago would just stick to, you know, how it is, a lot of back stitching, a lot of kits
Yeah,
basically. So you didn't really
yeah,
have options to change things out. But now it's the coolest thing ever because you could be doing a stitch along, same pattern, but you know, 20 different versions of it. And
yeah,
it just makes it so unique to, you know, you, the stitcher. So yeah,
yeah.
pretty cool.
It's really awesome. I love that part.
And I also loved how your mom was in your video too. They should go check that out because that was
Oh
really
yeah,
to just have the two of you together too, since you had mentioned your mom.
definitely.
That was a
We
cool
had a
video.
great time filming that one. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was
She
a
was
cool,
very nervous, but she did a good job.
did a very good job. She seemed just totally cool. So since you've really only been stitching kind of for the past year, do you have a favorite project that you've stitched in that year?
It's hard. I feel like, is that like picking a favorite child?
It is. That's what, yeah, a lot of people say it's very difficult.
Um, but I think there's two that stand out in my mind. One obviously was the sweatshirts that I made for my mom and I, just because that had um a lot of meaning to it, and it was very special for the two of us to have this whole trip experience at Disney. So those sweatshirts were definitely some of my favorite projects. I also really enjoyed the full coverage Sailor Moon piece that I made for my boyfriend. I think I shared that early on as well. Um, and it definitely makes me want to start like another full coverage piece on a different type of fabric. I think I was using a 12 count. It was a kit that I had
So
purchased. So I didn't love the number of strands I had to use, and didn't love the 12 count, but the finished product, like I surprised him with it. And when I gave it to him, he was just so blown away that I was able to complete that. So that piece also had a lot of meaning behind it as well. So those are probably my two favorites, but it's so hard to pick. I think as I continue to grow in my journey, I'm finding new designers and new patterns, and I'm like, I want to just stitch one of each to because there's such a different experience to stitch along with a different design or pattern. And everyone has their own style, so I want to try each of them.
Yeah, it's just stitching takes up a lot of time. So
Yeah, it does.
yeah, that's the thing is like you want to start everything, but
Mhm.
there's just not enough time. I
I
get it.
definitely,
Get
I
it.
definitely feel like for me, because I'm so new, I'm kind of allowing myself just a year of starts and bliss.
Yeah.
Like it's the honeymoon phase of my cross stitch journey, but I know I can't sustain like the number of starts I'm doing now forever. So I'll need to kind of tone that down a little bit and work on the projects that I really do love, but shiny.
There are people that have hundreds of whips.
It's so impressive to me when I see that. I'm like, I literally would forget what I had.
Yeah.
My
That's why
number.
there's whip parades at the beginning of the year, middle of the year.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah.
Yeah. The stitching on the sweatshirts is what really intrigued me because
Yeah.
that that just seems like in my eyes a nightmare. Trying to see, but how you did it, they turned out great. It was the coolest thing ever. And you don't see that.
Thank you.
Now, how your mom and your aunt stitched on clothing for like craft shows blows my
Yeah,
mind because it's so time consuming and
it
just
did.
so challenging. And for them to have enough for a craft show is just crazy.
Yeah. I think they would only have like maybe between 20 and 30 sweatshirts each year to sell, which is
Oh,
still a lot.
okay. That's a lot.
Yeah. And they wouldn't do like mine was a pretty big pattern that was on the
Yeah.
sweatshirt. Theirs were kind of smaller patterns, maybe in the center. So maybe not quite as many stitches, but still very impressive that they were able to do that. And back then they only had the waist canvas option, and I remember them struggling with it so many times and like being frustrated with it as well. So props to them for doing it for so long. I think the first sweatshirt I did, I used waist canvas and it was not fun getting it out. But
But
then I discovered the water soluble canvas, and that I mean that it basically just dissolves in water after you're done stitching. So you have the canvas that's pretty easy to kind of attach to the sweatshirt. It's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely different than stitching on like Aida or linen, only because there's not predefined holes, right, that you're going through. So each time you're kind of poking a hole through the sweatshirt and kind of making sure you're coming up in the hole of the grid as well. So it is time consuming. And I think that's why I haven't picked up another sweatshirt yet. I'm definitely not done stitching on clothing for sure. But after doing two back-to-back sweatshirts of the same
yeah,
pattern,
you knock those out.
I needed a little break from stitching on a sweatshirt or on clothing. So I'll pick it back up. But
Yeah. I mean, that's just impressive. So it's just the coolest thing. They got to go check that
yeah,
out.
yeah.
So, what do you enjoy most about stitching?
I think for me, it's kind of like therapeutic. There's a couple patterns where I found that I'm just able to kind of relax and zone out when I'm stitching. One of them is the Fruits of Plenty that I started by Modern Folk Embroidery. Just the way that the pattern goes, I'm able to kind of follow it fairly easy and just get in a rhythm, and it's easy to just kind of like let everything else go that's in my mind and focus on that. The other one that I literally just started at the end of February was the Long Dog Sampler Saga. That's my leap day start. Hopefully, I'll finish it in 4 years. Um, but that was another one where some of the pattern repeated itself as it went across the arches at the top. And so once you kind of found your rhythm with how to complete it, you kind of knew how your needle needed to go, and you didn't have to focus so much on counting or the pattern itself. Obviously, you still have to look at it, but I could just kind of zone out. And I think that's also what I like about running is it gives me time to just kind of let my mind decompress or let my mind run free, and I don't have to be focused on, any of the stress that's going on at the moment or things that are happening in my life. And so I think that's a commonality between running and stitching, at least for me. But I also like you're creating something. I think I've said a couple times in my videos that I would thank other floss tubers for sharing their art, and I really feel like cross stitch is an art form. Like, especially when you're able to kind of tweak things and change colors and make it your own. But even if you are following the pattern, you're still making a physical product. You're still making a piece of art that you have at the end, and that act of like creating something is really special for me. So I think those two things are really what drew me to cross stitch and why I like it so much.
Yeah, I think that's a thing. I call it therapy basically for me.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, because so many things happen and you just focus and you
yeah,
just let everything go. So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It's like your own little safe spot, and you can really, yeah,
Yep.
just get away for a moment.
And it definitely is artwork. I like to refer it as painting with floss is how I like to
Yeah,
describe it, because basically some of the pieces, once they're finished, they do look like paintings if you don't get like
exactly.
right up close. So yeah, it's such a cool hobby.
It really, really is. I'm so glad to have rediscovered it and be here.
Be part of the community.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get out of Stitchy talk a little bit
Okay.
and kind of learn a little bit more about you
Yeah.
as far as like your personal kind of things. What is your favorite genre of book or movie?
Yeah. I think I'm always gravitated towards like fantasy. I loved The Lord of the Rings, both the books and the movies. So anything that kind of takes me out of my present world and into a world that I can
Love
just
that.
sort of dream of is what I like. I guess maybe that's also a little bit why I like cross stitches. There's so many different patterns of things that, you know, don't necessarily exist in real life, that you can kind of escape into this world of, creating a dragon or creating a fairy, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. So yeah, fantasy is definitely where I go to with movies and books. I think books also I enjoy, like celebrity memoirs. Something easy that I can have on while I'm stitching and listen to. I usually prefer audiobooks. I don't read quite as much as I probably should or have in the past, but audiobooks are a way that I can still be stitching and kind of listen to a book as well.
That's the
Um,
book world.
yeah, exactly. So I found like the celebrity memoirs, it's kind of a fun read that I can listen to while I'm stitching and just learn a little bit more about people that I admire or, am enjoying. So
Cool. Cool. Love that. I think as stitchers, with all of the interviews that I have done over the past few years, fantasy tends to be a very popular genre for stitchers.
yeah,
It's crazy doing these interviews and kind of talking with a whole bunch of different people, but we all have
yeah,
stitching in common, and learning how much more we actually have in common. And that's one of them is like, the fantasy Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. It blows my mind how we're all so different, yet we're all the same in this
So
community.
alike. That's so interesting. Yeah, I definitely can see it, even just in the pattern designs, like you
Yeah.
can you can see that sort of fantasy world in a lot of different cross stitch patterns. So it makes sense, but that's really cool to see, especially as you've interviewed a lot of
Yeah,
people.
it's cool to like just go back and think about it. And
Yeah,
every time I do a new interview and somebody says like fantasy or there's true crime, there's a whole bunch of true crime people, like
yeah,
so much in common, so much. So speaking of fantasy and all that kind of stuff, what
yeah.
fictional place would you most like to go to?
Um, you know, there's a couple for sure, but I think one that would be fun to go to for like a day would be Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Oh, you want to be the safe one?
Well, yes, I would like to be safe, but also I would like to swim in that chocolate river, like have a little taste. I don't know, that always was especially the movie version. It always just made me like want to be there, and like you could eat anything that was in this factory. So I think for one day, obviously that's not sustainable to be eating chocolate and candy all day, but for one day, I think that'd be a really cool experience to go and explore the tour of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
factory.
I'm a big fan of like the original movie and
Yeah,
how they're inside and like the mushrooms, you could scoop up the whipped cream and
yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, that would be fun to experience. Like,
Yeah,
and I'm
that
sure
would
it
be
all tastes good. So
wow. That is a unique answer. Nobody has, I don't think anybody has said Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. So
yeah. I mean,
um,
obviously I'd love to go to the Shire or anywhere in Lord of the Rings
that's
as well.
popular.
Yeah, I figured probably that was it's also a given for me. But I would love to do that too, but Willy Wonka for a day would be fun.
I think that would be I want to do the where you drink the and you fly in that
Oh
dome
yeah.
I did.
Uh-huh.
I would want to do that. I think
Totally.
that would be fun.
There's something for everybody there.
Yeah, for sure. So, if you could choose to do anything for a day other than go to Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, what would you do?
Stitch? No. Besides cross stitching, I this is always a tough question for me. I don't know why. I think yeah, I think traveling is always something I would like to do. So maybe go to a city that I've never been in and just spend the day like engrossed in the city. I also I also love the beach. So put me on a beach somewhere for a day and that is my happy place. I know
Well,
those are both kind of simple things, but that's if I had the choice to do anything for a day, I probably would just go to the beach.
well, yeah, and especially if you don't get to do that very, often,
Exactly.
and you could go to the beach and stitch. So you
And
can
stitch as well. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
like us stitchers will find any excuse to be stitching. Well, my husband and I go on adventures.
Uh-huh.
We should go more often when he had more time off, but and I would bring my stitching and I would want to stitch because I'm a passenger princess. So
Yeah.
I would want to stitch. And he would be like, okay, it's time to put it away. We're getting into the woods. You want to see stuff. And I'm like, but I just have a couple more stitches. He's like, put it away. It'll be there when we come back out.
You're
So,
like, let me just finish this thread real quick, just a couple more.
but it's just the concept of, us stitchers just want to have stitching with us wherever we are. So
Yeah.
if we're at the beach, why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So
I agree.
well, besides running and cross stitch, do you have any other active hobbies that you do?
Those are probably my big two, honestly. They both take up a lot of time, so there's not a lot of free time for other things. Um, However, to sort of unwind, I do play some like games on my iPad or my iPhone. Both of them actually happen to be Disney games, but one is a Disney Emoji Blitz, and it's kind of like a Candy Crush type game where it's like a match three game. So I enjoy that one. And then there's another one called Disney Magic Kingdoms where you're sort of building your own Disney theme park and collecting characters along the way. Um, so I like those for just kind of little games that I can play passively here and there. But yeah, my two big hobbies definitely are running and cross stitch. I think every spare moment in the past year that I've had has gone to stitching, but also with running when I am training for a bigger race, it's the training process is very time consuming. So usually it's about an 18-week program that you follow to train for a marathon and you run sort of like 5 days a week and they're smaller runs during the weekdays and then on the weekends you build up and have a longer run. So it could be anywhere from I think the smallest one is 8 miles up to you get to 20 miles is your longest long run. So there's some weekends where you're out there and you are out there for hours running 18 miles and it's just time consuming. So
Oh, I can't grasp that because like for me, just trying to go just hike a mile with my husband, I can't.
hiking is hard too though because you've got the hills and like sometimes it can be very a steep incline and that's a different experience too.
18 miles. Oh my gosh. It blows my mind. I guess I don't know. I get that it's kind of it's a release for a lot of people
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff, but it's just incredible.
Yeah.
18-week prep. That's a
Yeah.
lot of work.
So it's time consuming. Like it just takes a lot. And I think when I'm in the middle of that type of training and I have time for one other hobby, it's cross stitch. And then that's kind of it. Those are
One
my
you're
two big
like
ones.
go, 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 and the other one is sitting and relaxing.
Right. I guess I
Good
kind of like the
balance.
balance. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, our hobby doesn't really allow us to be up and moving a lot,
Yeah.
right? We're sitting in our comfy spot and we're stitching And I think it's also important to sort of get out and do hikes or
Yeah,
go for walks or runs or whatever you can to stay active and motivated. So it's kind of a good balance of the
yeah,
two.
definitely a good balance. That's
I
pretty
like
cool.
the idea of having a long run and then having a recovery stitch session where I just
Yeah, that's
take
exactly
a stitch.
that's exactly the way that you can word it. Is just,
Yeah,
yeah, that 18-week lead up, and then you got, the final marathon, and then you get to relax. So yeah,
right,
that's,
right.
that's a good balance for sure. This is one of my most favorite questions that I
Okay.
ask, and it's how would your friends describe you?
This is also a tough one. I think people would describe me as kind and nice and friendly. The uh, it's hard to talk about myself like like this because I feel like I don't know.
That's why I like to ask the question, is because I think it helps you kind of, I don't know, see things differently, because you don't
Yeah,
most people don't think about that, I guess.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
kind of a fun question.
It is definitely it is. I think when my boyfriend and I started dating and I started meeting a lot of his friends for the first time, um, the comment people made was like, he's just so nice and genuine. Like he's not trying too hard to be nice. He's just so nice and easy to be around. So I think that type of compliment always meant a lot to me. And I think I get that from my mom mostly. She's very much the same, but yeah, I would say that's what they would describe me as.
So good traits for sure.
Yeah,
Not trying to be someone that you're really not. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So gonna get back into a little bit of stitchy talk. How
Okay.
do you prefer to stitch? Do you use like a hoop, Q-snap, in hand? That
Yeah. Uh, I guess because I'm so new, I've still been kind of trying everything. So I've only stitched in hand one time, so I would definitely say that's not my preferred method, but I stitched on, I think it was 14 count Ada in hand. And because the fabric was stiffer, I didn't mind stitching in hand as much with that. With a floppy linen, I think I would really have to take some time to practice the in-hand stitching. I just didn't feel as confident with how I was holding my fabric and the tension I was able to get. So I always use some sort of hoop. I have a lot of nerd hoops and Q snaps. Those are my sort of go-tos. Um, but I also just recently put the Mirabilia that I'm working on a scroll frame and trying to test that out a little bit. Now, I don't have a floor stand, so the scroll frame is very hard to hold and stitch on at the same time. So I'm in the process of looking for a floor stand that I think might make that process a little easier. Um, so I don't know, I guess to answer your question, I don't know that I have a favorite as of yet. Um, I'm still sort of narrowing it down, but I do like to have something to hold on to. So a Q snap or a nerd tube type of thing works best for me. But what about you? I'm curious, what's your
I'm a Q-snap.
a Q
I'm
snap?
a
Okay.
snap person. I have a lap stand that
Okay.
basically will sit. I sit on the couch, and I have a laptop kind of stand, or like
Okay.
a laptop table.
Yep.
Um, and then I have my lap stand on that, and I could two-hand stitch,
Perfect.
um, which is which is awesome. I
Did
can't.
it take you a while to learn two-handed stitching? I've only tried it once and it was tough. Like my left hand is not my dominant hand, so I
Oh,
was
see, my left hand is.
is your dominant. Okay, okay.
But it takes your brain a while to be like, okay, this hand, and and they work together, but
Yeah.
not too long. But yeah,
Okay.
my left hand is the one underneath because it's harder
Okay.
to find the holes, and
Yeah.
now it's no problem. So
Naturally. I
um
need to keep
pretty quick.
working on that. Once I get a stand, I think that will be my next goal to try to feel more comfortable with that. Because you can
Yeah,
definitely be faster, I think. I mean, you probably know from
yeah,
experience.
yeah, quite a bit faster.
Yeah.
For sure. um I like I like I, I'm not a big fan of the hoops, only I haven't tried the nerd hoop, but the
Yeah.
wooden ones would always leave these heavy duty creases
Yeah.
in my fabric, and it drove me insane.
Yeah.
So with Q snaps, you can build them bigger so that you don't
Yeah.
get it like on your piece or on your stitches or whatever. So yeah.
Totally. And you can customize the size that you want. Like you can
Yep.
include an 8-inch bar and an 11-inch bar and it
Love
kind of
that.
make it, yeah, how you want. Yeah, hoops are definitely not my preferred way either. I do like the Nurge hoops. I think I like them because they're square, so it
Yep.
feels like you get more coverage, kind of like a Q snap.
Yep. Similar to, yeah.
They're lighter to hold, and I think because I don't have a stand and I am holding it, sometimes the Q snap can get a little heavy if I have a bunch of things on it. But yeah.
Yeah. You just kind of have to find whatever you're comfortable with and kind of go from there. Yeah, I will
Totally.
say using a Q snap makes it a little bit more challenging for taking it with me everywhere because it's so bulky.
Right,
Like a
right.
nerd tube is thinner, but
Yeah,
I can't hold anything for a long period of time because I get arm pain.
yeah, yeah.
So, at least with the Q snap, it's a little bit thicker and, for
Right.
waiting for an oil change or something. Actually, when I go for an oil change, I have to post a picture sometime. I'm not even kidding because they take a good 2+ hours. These people are slow. I will bring my lap stand. I will bring my light. I will bring like my full setup and
I
I will
love
sit
it.
there in the waiting area. And people are just looking at me and it strikes up conversations. But if I'm going to sit there for 2+ hours, you better
Yeah,
bring
you're not
my full.
definitely not wasting that time. Like you're gonna put some stitches in.
Yeah, 100%. So,
That's cool. How often, one question I have for you about your Q snaps is
yep.
how often do you take the fabric out of the Q snap? So if do you put it in like only when you're stitching on it and then take it out, or you're leaving it in there for like up to a week, up to
I
six
leave
months?
I leave mine in there if I know that I'm gonna work on it for, the next few days or in a few days. I have a lot of Q snaps because I've been
Okay.
stitching for 25 plus years off and on.
Yeah.
So I've accumulated a lot. So there'll be times where I'll just leave it in a Q
Yeah.
snap because for me, it doesn't do any damage. I know
Yeah.
people say it tears but yeah, no, I'm a lazy stitcher. I'll leave it in there for a
I
while
think
and
I'm the same.
just
For sure.
because there's some pieces like why would you want to sit there and the more you pop off those clamps,
Yeah. The
um they
loopers.
get loose and then you have to, yeah, so I'm just like whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not one of those where I have to clean all of my pieces or anything like that. So
Right. Right.
do you have like a preferred fabric that you've found that you lean towards or are you just kind of still finding that too?
Still finding it, although I think 32 count, I've really enjoyed the projects that I've started on that. I think it's comfortable for me to see, and yeah, I like the results of stitching 2 strands over it. I can still use the loop start. Um, so I think 32 is great. I did the long dog piece I'm working on, that was my first 36 count, and I am enjoying that as well. So I think for something that doesn't involve beading, where it'd be too tight for the beads to
Yeah.
fit on a 36 count,
Yep.
I think maybe 36 will be my favorite. But for a mirabilia or a piece like that, where you are doing some bead work as well, I think 32 is so far is my preferred.
I'm the same except I'm Ada. So 16 for my
Yeah,
Mira is what I'm doing. And
yeah,
18 is my go-to because I like one strand for a lot of things on that.
totally.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have like a favorite place that you've traveled to and have you like within the past year brought any stitching or just a favorite place period that you've traveled to?
Yeah, I do. Last March, so just about a year ago, my boyfriend and I went to Japan and we spent about 12 days in Tokyo, and that trip was just incredible. I was going there because I ran the Tokyo Marathon, and I had been training. It's one of the world major marathons, so I'm trying to complete all 6 of them. I still have London. I'm running Chicago this fall, but I still have London and Boston to go, and then I'll be complete. um,
Oh,
yeah, but
awesome.
Tokyo was it was just such a lovely experience. The service there is out of this world. Everyone is so kind and so nice, and just want to make sure that if you're buying something from them, or even if you're at a Starbucks, that they treat you with the most respect. And it's really cool. And the city was just a lot of fun. I love the food. I could eat ramen every day of my life, I think. So it was just a really fun experience. Um, and then to tack on like running the race there, which was a cool way to see the city. Um, that was definitely, yeah, a highlight. I went to Japan thinking this is a once in a lifetime trip. Like I probably will never go back. And by the end of the trip, we both were kind of like, we're gonna need to come back here.
So
This
much
was
to see, I'm sure.
so much
Yeah.
to see, so much to eat, and yeah, we just had a really great time. So unfortunately, that was like right before my stitching journey began. I think at that point, maybe I had ordered the stitching kits, but they just hadn't arrived yet. So I didn't take any stitching with me on that trip, but definitely my favorite place that I've traveled to. And as far as like stitching with travel, I went to Florida for a few months over the holidays to visit my parents, and so I got some experience stitching on the plane, which was a first, and I enjoyed that. Yeah. um, and a little bit of car stitching when we went to see my brother down there. So a little bit of travel stitching, but that's the furthest my stitching has gone so far.
I know aren't you stitching a piece to commemorate your Japan trip, or you started a piece that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, part of it is the Fruits of Plenty. There's in the center, there's a house that you stitch, and there were a couple different options, and one of them is Japanese style
Oh,
art
cool.
in there.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to switch that out and put in the Japanese piece there. Um, yeah, so that'll sort of commemorate the trip and be a good part.
Love that. Does your boyfriend run with you?
He he doesn't run with me.
Okay.
He does run occasionally, like 2 or 3 miles. And he has run the LA Marathon one
Oh,
time in the past. So sort of a runner, but his back doesn't allow him to run too far.
yeah.
When he starts like
Understandable.
yeah, when he starts running longer distances, then his back starts hurting again, and it's not as comfortable for him. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
I was,
not quite a runner, but he is also into cross stitch. Not as much as me. Like
oh,
I kind of have jumped off the deep end, but he completed his first piece, which sometime I'll probably have to share it on my video or have him on or something. But it's of a Pekingese, his first dog that he had. It looks so good. I was so proud of him because there were a lot of like color changes, but it's all like a tan and white shade. And it looks really cool. So he did that one. And the project he's working on now is a sweater, which I've never stitched on a sweater, but he's doing it's a green sweater, and he's working on like a mountain scene with sort of trees and then two deer sitting on the front. So
right up my alley.
yeah, I think it's going to look really cool. We're a little curious to see how it turns out, after we remove the soluble canvas, just because the sweater material is a little more stretchy and
Yeah.
moving. So right now it's looking really good, but we're curious to see what happens
I
when
hope
we
it
remove the
stays.
canvas, if it shifts at all or if it still looks good. So I'll keep you
Hey,
all posted.
you're gonna have to convince him to make guest appearances so that we can see this stuff. All right.
Totally,
Because it would
totally.
be really neat to kind of see the progress of the sweater, because I'm sure many people are curious, because yeah, it like the sweatshirts are, they don't really stretch, but
Yeah,
sweaters, depending on like the cables or whatever you call them and all that, that'll
yeah.
be interesting.
Exactly. So it could be a failed experiment, but at least it's something trying. But it also could turn out really cool. So we'll see.
Well, what could happen is if it doesn't work as like the sweater, you can
Yeah,
always just cut it out and
that's
try
true.
and, frame it or put it on a um canvas or something like that
Yep,
too. And
that's
it's
true.
a lot of work that he's doing. So
It is, yeah. It's a pretty big piece. So I definitely will have to have him come on and sort of share what
yeah.
he's working
Yeah,
into.
well,
But
now he's gonna be obligated to.
yeah, exactly. We sort of forced him into it.
Um,
But it's cool
so
because we get to share it together. So
yeah, that is really neat. I've been trying like forever to get my husband to stitch, and it's just not happening. And I'm like,
not his thing.
my daughter does, my oldest daughter.
Okay.
So at least I got that, and my sister, but I want my husband to stitch.
Totally, totally.
It's funny. Um, so what can you not do without for your stitching? Like your favorite go-to must-have besides our basics that we actually need?
Yeah. I think I mentioned it before, but definitely the needle minder. I would be losing needles left and right if I didn't have that with me. I also I really prefer stitching from a PDF pattern. So I use Markup RXP for on my iPad to have the pattern, and it's I really enjoy marking it off on there and keeping track of where I am stitching wise. So if I can use a PDF, I try to do that or kind of convert the pattern in. So that's kind of like I guess it's not a must have because I do stitch from some patterns or from paper patterns as well, but I definitely prefer the
Yeah.
PDF.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I prefer I don't use markup, I use good notes
Oh
on my
yeah, yeah.
but same concept because I
Yeah.
could take a picture of the paper pattern, put it in there, and then blow it up, and it makes it just so much more convenient, I
It
think.
does. Yeah. Yep. So those are two things that I definitely need when I'm stitching.
You need a needle minder to match every project, though. That's
It's
the thing.
true. It's true. I
And you
keep
make
finding
your own needle minder, so that's
I
kind of
did. It was really cool. I made some from pins that I when I went to Disney, and then
yeah.
I guess the one that I'm most proud of is I found a seashell while we were on the beach in Florida. And I was like, I wonder if somehow I could turn this into a needle minder. And so I was able to kind of finagle it to get the magnet on the back. And so now with the mermaid piece I'm stitching, I have a seashell needle minder from my trip to Florida. So things like that. It always makes the project a little more special.
Well, yeah, and then the needle minder, you have a memory,
Yeah.
like if
Yeah,
I got this, that's cool. I like that.
exactly. I love collecting them.
Yeah, there, it's an addiction.
Yeah.
For I think there's two different parts to cross stitch. There's like the stitching part, and then there's the collecting part, like the needle minders and floss and fabric and everything. There's a collecting part too. So
Definitely. They go hand in hand for sure.
yeah, it's dangerous. And so I know you kind of have set projects that you work on, but how do you decide on which project you're going to work on next?
Yeah. I actually just asked the same question in my last Flosstube video because as I have more starts and more projects to work on, I asked everybody, how do you rotate through your whips? Because there's projects. Oops, sorry about the thumbs up. I don't know if you can see that.
That's funny.
um, there's projects that I haven't picked up in like a month, and it's not because I don't like them, but there's just been other projects that have drawn to me. So to answer your question, so far it's sort of just based on my mood. I some days I'll be drawn to a certain project, and I don't really have any hard and fast rules right now or any set plans for a certain piece, a certain day of the week. I just kind of pick up what I am feeling that day. Because for me that's the fun of it, right? Like if we're in the mood to stitch on something, let's indulge and stitch on that project. And I think part of it is just not feeling bad that you haven't stitched on other projects that are maybe older or have been sitting there longer. And I know eventually I'll get back to all of them because I really do like the projects I have so far. But yeah, I'm definitely a mood stitcher. I think as I've started more things and my whip count has grown, I would like to find some sort of pattern or rotation that I can get into. And I know a lot of people use like a decision wheel or kind of pulling from a hat and picking a random project. I think that might be something I try just for like one day a week where just let randomness decide. And then maybe an old whip will come up or maybe something I haven't worked on in a while will come up, but I'm not kind of tied to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think the majority of people that I've talked to doing these interviews is basically whatever calls to them, whatever mood
Yeah.
they're in. There are a couple that have a schedule.
Mhm.
Olivia Pumpkin Hollow Quilts, she has a schedule, and she still completes large pieces and homework, like do this section at this time, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I've tried the wheel. I don't like to be told what to do. So even
Yeah.
even if a project comes up that I'm like, I haven't touched that in a while, but you told me to do it, so I'm not doing it.
Don't
So it
want to
doesn't
now.
work for me.
Yeah.
But Yeah, it's basically whatever, calls to the stitcher is
Yeah.
the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm amazed by the people who are able to plan out sort of each day what they're going to stitch on, or even like a couple days a month,
Yeah.
and they have the whole plan. I'm like, that is so enticing to me. I think it's hard, like I am a planner, but up to a certain point, and I think having a set plan, kind of like you were saying, would just make me want to divert from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean, unless you have like a deadline of something that, like your sweatshirts or something that you
yeah,
had to knock out at a certain time.
yeah,
I think stitching is just you stitch what is calling to you, because if
yeah,
you're forcing yourself to stitch on a piece that is just not speaking to you at that time because your schedule says you have to, like that.
totally.
And to some people that works because it's still motivating them to get it done. I guess it's to each their own. You got to find your own kind of.
Yeah, you do. That's a very good point though, because when I was working on the sweatshirts and I had to finish them by Christmas, that deadline that was looming over me, it it didn't take the joy out of stitching. I still was enjoying it, but I realized that I don't want to have these hard deadlines for my stitching. I don't mind making things for people, but I don't want to have a set date where I have to have this done by, because it wasn't as much fun. It
A
became
little
almost like,
stressful, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
adds a bit of stress to a hobby that is not supposed to be stressful.
exactly,
So yeah,
exactly. Don't
yeah.
need to add stress to a hobby that I'm enjoying. So I think since then I've really just kind of stitched based on my mood, but that's a very good point.
I think that's pretty common. It's just whatever kind of calls
Yeah.
to us. So we're down to the last question.
Okay.
But
Okay.
before we get to it, because the last question is my most favorite.
Okay.
But before we get to that question, I'm just curious if there's something that you'd like to share with all of us that not very many people kind of know about.
Sure. Um, yeah, one thing is what I used to do for my job. When I first moved to the city, I started working for a small movie theater company, and I worked there for about 10 years. And then during that time, I was promoted into different roles, and my end role was I was the film buyer for this movie theater company. So they had a chain of theaters in California and a chain in Hawaii, and then some random theaters throughout the country as well. And I was the film buyer, which meant that I basically decided what movies we were going to play in the theater each week at those theaters. Um,
That is
it was
cool.
really it was a really, really cool experience. I would get to go to the Toronto International Film Festival and kind of see things that were slated to come out later that year, and kind of see them early to know what do I want to put in our theaters. Um, and it wasn't always just what I wanted to see, obviously, because my tastes are different than other people's, but it was really fun to be in that world and to
Cool.
really make an impact on what people are watching in the theater. It was a lot of responsibility too, because if you booked the wrong movie and it
And
didn't
it's
make any money, then yeah, then it wasn't so good. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. And it's something that especially, my viewers on the Crosstube or on the Flosstube community don't really know what I used to do. But that all sort of changed in 2020 when COVID happened and the theater shut down, and life changed. But I definitely look back on that job with fond memories, and it was a really fun job that I think a lot of people don't even know really exists.
no, I didn't even know. Now I do, but
Yeah,
you never really think of how the movies make it to the movie
right,
theater.
right. Because not every movie is played at every theater, right?
Right.
Like sometimes it's just a certain number, and so basically my job was to, if there was a film that I really wanted to play at our theater, was to fight for it and to work with the studios and like explain why I think it will do really well at our theater, and how our audience will be receptive to it, that type of thing. So
Cool.
it was really interesting and definitely a fun job.
That's neat. That's really cool. Yeah, that's not something that many people really think about, but that there is a job and somebody choosing movies for the theaters.
Yeah. And I didn't know it either until I sort of fell into it. I started at the company as an assistant, and then kind of worked my way through the ranks and into the position. So it was fun to discover.
Cool. Pretty cool. So, last question.
Yeah.
My most favorite because it kind of gets you thinking because the last few years have been rough for everybody.
To
speaking of
say the
the
least.
pandemic and, you know, the lockdown and movie theaters closing and losing businesses and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What has been the best thing that has happened to you throughout that time?
Yeah. I think for me it's kind of twofold. Like my life really took a turn during COVID because I kind of switched careers, and then a couple years later I also moved to a new apartment. So everything sort of changed for me, but I think it was all for the better. I really am enjoying the job that I'm at now. I really enjoy being able to work from home. Gives me a lot of flexibility. I get to be home with Winston during the day, so I'm really happy about that. And I also got to move in to the apartment with my boyfriend, and so that's been such a fun experience. And just kind of combining our two worlds and our two lives together has been really cool. Obviously, there's challenges with it as well, but I'm really happy with where we are, and that yeah, that's been probably the highlight for me, is being able to start really living day-to-day life with him. So
That's cool. I mean, the pandemic was terrible, but I like that so many good things from doing these interviews and everybody talking about the good things that have come out of it.
yeah,
Um, because you got to look at the positive. So that's cool that y'all got to move in together, you've changed careers, you know,
yeah,
you've started almost a new life
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Uh, because of the pandemic.
Yeah,
It's
and it is, you're right. It is amazing to hear how many people have a similar sort of story of their life, of how, it really helped you prioritize things, what was important in your life, and what really meant a lot to you. And people were able to kind of switch things up, and it wasn't easy. Nobody had an easy time doing it, and probably no one really wanted to go through that, obviously.
yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
think so, but yeah.
There definitely were positives that you can pull from it in the outcomes of where we are now. Um, but
I
yeah,
think I think also for our community, for the stitching community, during that time, it brought back a lot of stitchers because
yeah,
everybody was home and
yeah,
they're like, what are we gonna do? Oh, we used to stitch years ago. And so our community really, really grew. We had a lot of new floss tubers and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. And that helped the whole, I guess, what's the word? I can't even think. Like the economy for cross stitch. There's
yeah,
more brick and mortar shops opening now. There's more,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. So because of the pandemic, it has grown our community, which kind of ebbs and flows for popularity uh,
yeah, yeah,
quite a bit. But that was a huge, huge plus, I think, for just stitching.
yeah, yeah. Looking back on it, I wish I was cross stitching during the pandemic because I had all this time at home that I was just sitting there, and I was doing puzzles, or filling my time with things. But I'm like, if I had been stitching, think of all the projects I could have gotten done, or
Yeah.
like work.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I mean, during that time, it was harder to get stuff.
True, true.
So but like there were still ways around, being
Yeah,
able to keep busy and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So it definitely helped during that time in
yeah,
sort of floss tube for a lot of people. So
yeah,
that's how these interviews stemmed, and I love them because I get to chat with people that I wouldn't generally ever get to meet unless we randomly met at a retreat or something like that,
right, right,
so
exactly.
yeah, it's
Another positive thing that came out of the pandemic.
right, just for the stitching community.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing your stitching journey and your personal life. Too bad we didn't
yeah.
get to meet Winston, but I know he's under the blankie.
He
We
didn't
don't want to
sound like
disturb him. Go check out his channel and you can see Winston.
yeah. Winston will make some more appearances for sure.
We don't
But
want to disturb the baby.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But
But
thank you so
no,
much for having
yeah,
me on here. I really appreciate you reaching out, and so happy to talk to you. And yeah, this was a really cool experience. So thank you so
it was
much
a lot
for
of
not
fun.
only doing it, but asking me to come on. That was great.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we get a lot of people over to your channel because it I think your channel is like a breath of fresh air. It's new and different. Well,
Yeah,
with what you share and the projects that you stitch, I think are really neat too. So I think a lot
Thank
of people will be intrigued and will come and check you out for sure. So
Yeah, come on over. It's you'll definitely see my journey. You know, I'm not holding anything back, and I'm still learning as I go. So if you want to learn and grow with me or watch my journey, come on over. Happy to have you.
I'm sure they will, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to say bye to everybody on Flosstube. Bye.
Bye, everyone.